Hello, I am Max and you're watching Cool Stuff in Weird Cars, and in today's video we're finally having an in-depth look at my 1993 Toyota Celsior I bought a few months ago. And by the end of this video you should know everything you need to know about this Toyota Celsior, including the basic stuff and some more interesting quirks and features and whatnot. And of course I will take it on a thorough drive and let you know exactly how it feels, just in case you would like to buy one of these yourself. And of course, as a lot of you probably know, I actually owned a 1994 Lexus LS400 before I bought this car, actually kind of during. And I actually have a video of comparing a lot of the differences as well as similarities between the two already on the channel, and I'll leave that in a card on the top right or at the end of the video. And I will be touching on a few things in this video, but for the most part, all of the comparisons are going to be in that video. So, go ahead and get started with this. You see the key here, there's nothing really interesting about it. There's no actual remote on it on this car, sadly. On the LS400 it did have a remote where you just press a button on the side of it, but it's simple. Turn to the left, all doors lock, or all the doors unlock. Turn to the right and they all lock. This car has a silver and gray exterior with a gray cloth interior, which is something you didn't really find on the LS400s. Of course, this car is right-hand drive, so most of your controls are over on this side here. You do have power windows for all four windows right here, automatic up and down on the drivers, and window locks and door locks up in front. A little bit of storage down below, and a chrome door handle up on top. Both front seats are power adjustable in this car, but sadly, the headrests are not, unlike the LS400. Inside, everything's pretty much almost identical to the LS400 of the same years, other than of course everything is pretty much mirrored for being right-hand drive. You do have a Toyota emblem in the middle of the steering wheel here, which definitely shows you that this is not an LS400, and I'll go ahead and turn the key on. This does have the nice exact same gauge cluster as the LS400. That thing makes noise every time I turn it on. If you've never seen one of these gauge clusters, it's kind of cool actually. So you'll notice there's a few warning lights up in the middle, such as the tail light out, check engine light, oil pressure, stuff like that. But what's cool about it is that if you move side to side like this, it's actually kind of 3D. Those are actually set further into the gauge cluster compared to the needles and the numbers for the gauges themselves. It's very nice. This car does have 87,694 kilometers on it, which is about 53,400 miles or so. Not much at all for one of these cars specifically. And we'll go ahead, fire it up. You'll notice it's extremely quiet. This thing also apparently makes noise every time that you turn the key on. Hence why I just did it again. Also, the tachometer does not work half the time, so that's why it's currently fairly far off. But we'll go ahead and close this door, and we'll check out the rest of the interior. Over on the right side you do have a vent over here that you can open and close. Power mirrors, power folding mirrors I should say, which is I believe specific to the Celsiors themselves. Mirror controls right there. Your trunk release as well as the fuel cap release down here that you can lock if you just push that in and it's locked. You just have to put the key in, turn it, and it'll unlock. Of course the key does go in on the right side, which is something that people sometimes worry about with these JDM cars because it's strange, because everything else is mirrored except for where the key goes in, strangely enough. Cruise control here on the steering wheel, which I'll talk about a little bit more later on in the video because it has something weird with it that I have talked about a little bit before, but mainly on like Twitter and stuff. Interesting thing about JDM cars compared to British cars and I believe Australian cars, I'm not sure about Australian, but the turn signal stalk is here on the right side, with the windshield wipers on the left side. Of course, it works exactly like the LS400s where you push for brights, pull for flash, simple as that, headlights, you know, stuff like that. For whatever reason, British cars, the turn signals are still on the left. Interesting fun fact. Very simple to read gauges. Fuel gauge on the left, the speedometer, which only goes up to 180 kilometers per hour, which is about 110, 111 miles per hour. The tachometer, which I said doesn't really work that well, so that's why it's very far off right now, and it'll probably just stop working altogether at some point. And the temperature gauge on the far right, and you do have a digital readout for the outside temperature and your odometer. Speaking of the odometer, you have trip right here. You have two different settings. You can reset it and just go back to the odometer. So the stock for the windshield wipers is over here. There's a few interesting things with the windshield wipers that I noticed on this car compared to the LS400. One is the fact that you can push this and it sprays the windshield. And you can also push in on the end of it and it sprays the windshield. I have absolutely no clue of what the pushing one is because the end of the stock one was actually the same as the LS400. There's even a completely separate like jug underneath the hood for pushing it versus pushing the end in. No clue why that is. Another interesting thing that I just noticed about this car is that I'll actually insert a clip from that night.
That's a super weird thing about my Celsior. So you see the windshield wipers are going slow, and I haven't touched it yet. As soon as I start moving, they start going at continuous speed. But as soon as I stop, which I'll do here in just a second, stop like right here. Watch. I stop. They go at a slower speed. It's so weird.
Also on the left side of the steering wheel here, on this car, and unlike the LS400, you do not have a four-way power steering wheel. On this, you have manual telescope, which you can see right there, and power tilt. And you do have the automatic tilt-away as well on this car. The driver's airbag was standard, no passenger airbag in this car. And one more thing before we head off to the center console here is the auto air purifier, which is a very unique JDM thing on this car. So basically, you turn that on, as I just did. You can have auto, low, or high, or whatever, and it will produce an aroma, which to me smells like just old people, and it doesn't smell good at all. But it's supposed to, I guess if you run past roadkill or something and it smells real bad, you turn this on for a few seconds and it purifies the air in the car, strangely enough. And down below we do have the easy pass thing that all JDM cars have, which is what you heard in the beginning. Parking brake release and the parking brake down below. As I mentioned, the center stack is basically mirrored from the LS400. You could see basically on the LS400 you would just imagine all these buttons on the exact opposite side of where they are right now. It's a strange thing, which is a strange attention to detail that most JDM cars don't have, but on the LS400 and the Celsior they actually did it. A few things to note: it does have automatic climate control. Where's the auto button? There it is. Very simple to use. This car does actually have working screens, unlike the LS400 that I had, front and rear defrost. And the interesting thing here is this button right here, which actually I'll turn this on the low. This button right here directs more air to the back seat. So you turn that on and it just directs more air to the rear vents. Other than that, it's pretty simple. It does show this temperature in Celsius, which makes sense because in Japan they use Celsius instead of Fahrenheit. And we'll turn that off. You have your hazard switch up here in the middle, radio down below that. Very simple. It's not going to get, well, actually I can get one station. Interesting things about this: it goes by 0.1 instead of 0.2 whenever you use the seek button, unlike the American market cars. And on the Japanese cars, because in Japan they have different radio frequencies, it goes from about 90 to 75, strangely enough. And like I said, it's going to find one station, and that's 88.1. Otherwise, it's pretty similar. You do have a button to switch it between AM and FM. I don't know why that exists, because you have AM and FM right here, and this is, what the LS400 had. Two different presets, of course, for each button. You just do FM1 and FM2, and it does have a tape player. It does not have the CD changer, but I'm not too worried about that. Of course, all of the different little selectors down here for your equalizer. Very simple to use. Powered off right there. Down below that, ashtray, which is simple to remove. If you want to remove it to clean it, just press the button. And that's about that. And we get to the shifter after that. So there's some interesting things with this shifter compared to the LS400. One is the fact that if I don't press on the brake, which you can see I'm nowhere near the brake, I'll just leave my feet like right there. Oh, it's actually letting me do it. That's weird. I'm guessing it's kind of broken then, because sometimes it'll let me shift without even hitting the brake. But you'll notice this button right here, which is exactly what this button is. So I'll try and push it down. You can see I can actually move the shifter while pushing down this red button. Oh, there we go. See, now it's just letting me shift whenever I want to. There's a few more little tidbits I want to show you with the shifter, well, specifically with using it. If you put it in reverse, the car beeps. Not outside, like a truck, inside at you, letting you know that you're in reverse. Once you leave reverse, any other gear, it does not do it in. You have your overdrive selector here on the right side, and you have the ECT button down here, which is electronically controlled transmission. You have power mode, which is basically slightly faster downshifts, and by that I mean it downshifts with less throttle input compared to normal, and of course normal is just a normal automatic transmission. Cup holders, very simple to use, and the center console, which doesn't really have anything to note in it. And finally up top, since this is a slightly lower spec Celsior, you do not get a power sunroof. You do get a light up here, which is nice, as well as little map lights, and you get a manually dimming rear view mirror, as well as this little piece right here, which is also very, very nice, and it blocks out sun that comes over the rear view mirror there. Lighted vanity mirror, and some Japanese writing on the bottom of it. And so let's shut it off, and we'll check out the outside. So considering the inside of this car looked just like the Lexus LS400 except for everything was mirrored, you probably won't be surprised when I tell you the outside is basically the same as well. I touched on a few things in my other video that I mentioned earlier, like the headlights are one piece instead of two pieces for the headlight and the fog light. The turn signals work a little bit differently, and a few other very, very slight differences like the third brake light. For the most part though, it's pretty much identical. Got the exact same wheels, just with different center caps. As I mentioned, there is no sunroof up top. It's just a nice, clean, simple car. The first generation, or UCF-10 generation of the Lexus LS400 and Toyota Celsior lasted for around 4 years. Although oddly enough, in 1994 was when the UCF-20 was introduced for the Celsior, even though the LS400 was still the UCF-10. For 1993, both the Celsior and the LS got a slight facelift. Back in the back, of course, you do get these nicely, cleanly styled brake lights, which I've personally always liked. Their brake light is also very long for some reason. Don't know why that is. But otherwise, identical to the LS400. Dual exhaust down below. Fuel cap on this side. It's just a timeless design it's just simple, which is what I like about it. It's not flashy, it's not showing off, it just exists. And I appreciate that. And so we'll pop the hood. Under the hood, this car does feature the exact same power plant as the same model year Lexus LS400, which is a 1UZ FE V8. Of course, attached to a 4-speed automatic transmission. Of course, it looks almost identical under here, other than the fact that it says Toyota there in the middle instead of Lexus. As well as the little jug down here, like I was mentioning, that is for the other windshield washer fluid. For 1993, both the LS400 and the Celsior made about 250 horsepower and 260 foot-pounds of torque. Pretty respectable. And now for the passenger side. That's what we're calling this the passengers. One thing you'll notice is that you don't get quite as many options with the power seat. Here on the passenger side, I believe it's missing lumbar, then maybe something else. But it's very simple over here. You have pretty much the same door panel. You do only have one window control and a door lock on the door itself. And we do have a nice little glove box, which is actually a lot nicer than the LS400 because the LS400 by 1993 had a passenger airbag. So it's nice to actually have a full glove box instead. And now moving into the back seat, which if you watch my LS400 review, you would know that there's definitely a lot of space back here. And it's no different on the JDM car. I also should have mentioned that you do get some nice floor mats in this car. It does say Celsior in the middle there. But you'd be surprised because I am 6'2". The front seat is exactly where I would drive normally, and it's definitely not doing any favors for the back seat. But as you can tell, there's a slight amount of space between my knees and the seat, which is not bad at all. There's a little mechanism for, actually this is the mechanism for adjusting the headrest, of course. Down here in the center you do get a few little things back here. You can control how much air is coming through your vents. You can also adjust the vents yourself. And you can also press this button, which is the same button up there, where it directs more air back here. Cigarette lighter. You do get ashtrays in both of the doors, as well as speakers. And the nicest thing is that if you flip this down right here, you get a center console, which is very similar to the LS400, except for the fact that this one has cup holders, which is fantastic. They're not very big cup holders, they're actually quite tiny, but at least the thought is there, and there's also a little bit of storage right here, which is actually super nice because the LS400 did not have rear cup holders at all. So, go ahead and put that back up. Otherwise, you do get some pockets back here, and that's really about it for the back seat. Interesting thing to know, and I noticed with the LS400, is you have little map lights back here, which you can turn on, of course. Well, you can turn on the map light. Well, you should be able to turn on the map light, but you have these lights in the back. And basically what those do, if I open this door, it turns on that specific light. And it works with any of the doors in the car. There's lights in the bottoms of the doors in the front that turn on when you open that specific door. And of course, this side has another light like that. Something I thought was interesting. But that'll be it for the inside. There are two ways to open the trunk in this car. One is by the button up in front that I showed you before, as well as there's a keyhole right here. Pops right open, and there's not really much to talk about in here. Just like the LS400 back here though, you do get a nice little first aid kit back here, which I'm sure works great after being in there for 27 years. And on the left side over here, you do have a toolkit. Otherwise, it's just a nice sized trunk. Definitely more than enough space for the average suitcase and the average luggage. And it is padded on top. And now let's talk about the thing that you all are probably most interested in, which is, how does this car drive? Well, I hate to break it to you, but it's not very exciting. Now I know the whole right-hand drive thing is the exciting part of driving this car, obviously. The Lexus LS400 / of course Toyota Celsior, they're not sports cars in the slightest. They are heavy, not great handling luxury cars. I guess you could still consider this a luxury car. But the thing is that they don't have much power. The suspension is pretty soft. It's more stiff than other cars, like say a Cadillac or a Lincoln of the same year, but it's still floaty. The heck is... I have no clue what that thing is I just passed. But of course the first thing you'll notice is that, turn that off. Like, this car is so quiet. Like, other than me hitting bumps, you can't hear hardly anything. Like, if I have the radio on, I cannot hear the engine running at all. If I have the radio on at all, is what I should be saying. Now, the LS400 I had 176,000 miles on it, and of course this one has 120,000 less than that. And that's probably the big reason that car was a lot louder on the inside compared to this car. Even with the AC on a little bit, it's still just extremely quiet in here. But of course, right-hand drive does take some time to get used to. No matter who you are, as long as you've been driving, of course, left-hand drive cars before, and only left-hand drive cars, you'll definitely have to practice. I picked up on it kind of quick, especially with this car, because I had driven a few right-hand drive cars. If you look back at my channel, there's a few videos of me driving like a Land Cruiser and a Nissan Pao, or at least two of them, and a Supra too, that were all right-hand drive. You can look those videos up if you want to see my first impressions, which, be warned, they are very old videos. But I think because of those, it helped me be able to adapt to this car a lot easier. And of course, this car is fantastic. I'm gonna say it right now that the Lexus the Toyota Celsior, I should say, is quite possibly the best first JDM car. I'm gonna throw that out there because I have reasons for this. So they're cheap. I bought this one for $8,500. Besides the fact that it was on the other side of the country, I had to rent a trailer, had to pay for gas in my truck, you know, stuff like that. But the car itself was $8,500, well, $8,495. And that was pretty much the cheapest vehicle. I think it was actually the cheapest vehicle they had in stock when I bought this. There was definitely not a Celsior cheaper than this, because this one's also pretty low spec. It doesn't have all the fancy options, like it doesn't have all the rear seat controls and all that stuff, but you're still getting the same engine, the same transmission, all the important stuff you're getting still. And along with that, there's a few other reasons. Specifically, parts. One, Lexus LS400s aren't known to break at all. I mean, they have normal car stuff, like you'll even go through a wheel bearing every now and then, like I did with my LS400. But you're not gonna have to rebuild the engine after 150,000 miles, or the transmission, maybe. They're known to be extremely reliable. That's why every single one you see on Craigslist or whatever has 280,000 miles on it. And the Celsior is the exact same car. Besides some differences, of course, in the interior, there's some, of course, different pieces, as well as a few little exterior things that are slightly different. You can find parts for these too. You can just go in the Toyota dealership, you can order a starter, or a valve cover gasket, or anything that you need that's shared between this car and the LS400. And also, one more thing, this car is very easy to drive. Of course, it's an automatic, it's a decently sized car, it's got fantastic visibility all the way around. Like, I can literally look and see anywhere. The biggest blind spot is the biggest blind spot I have is a C-pillar, and that's not even much of a blind spot. It's maybe 5 inches. But it all just makes this car a great value, and also a great just introduction to buying or having a JDM car. So if you're looking for a JDM car that you can daily drive, specifically, because, you know, I have no reason not to daily drive this car. Besides the fact that, you know, I don't want to not put miles on it. Like, that's just silly, because it's going to take the miles no matter what. I don't care about ruining the low mileage aspect of it. And these are known to be fairly safe vehicles as well. It's a car you don't have to worry about necessarily. Okay, so now we'll go over the last thing. I don't know why I actually waited until I got on the highway to say this. The interesting thing about the cruise control in this car. So surprisingly, this car has cruise control. Apparently a lot of JDM cars don't have it at all. I don't know about the specifics of how many Celsiors do and don't, but I've heard it's not a very popular option on most cars in Japan, which makes sense because they don't have thousands and thousands of miles of highway that you can just drive one direction on. But the interesting thing about it is that the cruise control will engage and work, and you know, you can accelerate, decelerate up to 108 kilometers per hour or so, which equates to about 68, 69 miles per hour. The thing is, it will not work above that speed. It won't accelerate any faster than 108 kilometers per hour. So, if you're a person like me, and you like to use your cruise control, you have two options. You can either not use cruise control, which is not fun. You can control the throttle yourself, which I don't really care to do, because, you know, I'm gonna drive this thing probably to every state in this country if I can. And the third option is to modify it and change out, there's some sort of like computer thing for the cruise control. You can switch out probably with an LS400s and you can have faster cruise control. So I have to do one of those things if I'm driving this car, which isn't fun, but it's a very, very, very small nitpick I have with this car. Otherwise, I love it, honestly. There's not really anything else I can say bad about this car. And really, those are my final thoughts on the Celsior as we're getting on the highway here. Now, you're gonna see this out of order, of course, because I'm gonna put what I'm about to say somewhere earlier in the driving part. But thank you all so much for watching this video. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns specifically about the Toyota Celsior, let me know in the comments section below. So thank you all so much for watching this video. Hope you're excited for the return of car reviews, because I have a few to record still, definitely, that are going to come out soon. Specifically, my other vehicle that I have not shot a video of, well, not shot a review video of yet, and at least one other, maybe two. So thank you all so much for watching this video, and I shall see you all in the next one.